Welcome, dear listener, to Wishcrafting, the place where folklore, magic, and history intertwine like ivy on an ancient temple. I'm Wishamaya, your guide through the esoteric and the enchanting. Today, we're journeying back to the wild and wondrous festival of Floralia, a celebration of flowers, fertility, and uninhibited joy. Held in honor of the Roman goddess Flora, this festival was a riot of color, dance, and indulgence, an ecstatic embrace of life in bloom. But beyond revelry, Floralia holds a deep magical significance, especially for those who walk the witch's path. So, let's step into the gardens of history and uncover the magic of Flora's sacred rites. The festival of Floralia dates back to 240 BCE, when the Roman Senate officially established it as a public festival in honor of Flora, the goddess of flowers, yes, but also a fertility goddess and a goddess who embodied the energy of renewal. It was originally a ludi, or public games festival, which was held towards the end of April and the beginning of May, aligning it with Beltane and other spring fertility celebrations, which is why we're talking about it now. This festival was all about unleashing the wild, sensual energy of spring. Unlike the more reserved, formal, and religious festivals of Rome, Floralia was a carnival of excess, full of theatrical performances, feasting, flower-wearing, and a hearty dose of debauchery. The celebration lasted for 6 days, culminating in rituals designed to ensure the fertility of crops, animals, and of course, the people. At its heart, Floralia was an invitation to embrace joy, passion, and radical self-expression, as is so prevalent during the season of spring. This was not a time for restraint. It was a time to honor life at its fullest, in all its hot, messy, blooming beauty. At the center of Floralia was Flora, the Roman goddess of flowers, vegetation, and, like I mentioned before, renewal. That is so key when talking about Flora. Unlike other agricultural deities who ruled over the entire cycles of life and death, Flora's domain was purely the joy of things coming into bloom. The essence of knowing that this is going to be short-lived and won't last forever, so we should take a time to literally and figuratively smell the roses. Flora's role was vital. She ensured that the fruit trees bore fruit, that the crops sprouted from the earth, and that flowers burst forth in a dazzling array of colors, just in time for the winter blues to really start bringing us down. Flora comes in and brings in this new, dazzling spring energy full of color and the remembrance of the wheel turning and life going on. Flora was a goddess of sensory pleasure, ruling over not just the practical fertility of plants, but also the aesthetic and sensual delights of nature as well. Flora was depicted as a young woman adorned with garlands of flowers, often seen scattering blossoms or holding a cornucopia, symbolizing abundance and the abundance she brings with her existence and her blessings. Unlike some of the more stern deities of Rome, Flora was a soft and indulgent goddess, inviting people to revel in beauty and celebrate the power of attraction. Interestingly, Flora wasn't just a Roman goddess. Her origins trace back to the Sabine people before Rome even became an empire. The Sabines were an ancient Italian people who were a part of the larger Umbrian ethnic group in ancient Italy. They lived in the mountainous region of Sabina, which was north of Rome, and they were known for their strong military traditions and their conflicts with the early Romans. They also had very rich religious traditions, and many of their deities were later integrated into Roman mythology. The Sabines had their own agricultural and fertility deities, and some scholars believe that Flora may have originally been a local Sabine goddess, before, of course, being fully embraced by the Romans. The Sabines placed great importance on the cycles of nature, particularly fertility and renewal, which aligns perfectly with Flora's domain over blossoming flowers, spring, and abundance. One of the strongest connections between the Sabines and Flora is their influence on Roman religious traditions. The Roman king Numa Pompilius, say that 3 times fast, who was of Sabine origin, was responsible for introducing many religious rites to Rome, possibly including the veneration of Flora. Some legends suggest that Flora's worship was influenced by older Sabine and Etruscan fertility goddesses, eventually becoming part of the Roman pantheon. However, Flora has counterparts in other cultures too. For example, the Greek goddess Chloris, who presided over spring and flowers, is often equated with Flora. Flora also has many connections and parallels to Aphrodite. No surprise there. Flora and Aphrodite share natural associations through love, beauty, and of course fertility. But Flora is specifically tied to flowers and nature in bloom, while Aphrodite is the essence of desire itself. The desire to bloom, the desire to procreate, the desire to this, that, and the other. She is desire. And Flora is the force that brings that desire to fruition. They're very closely related. They represent 2 sides of the same coin, and they're also both incredibly sensual in their power. When you take a look at these 2 goddesses who represent love, beauty, fertility, desire, sensuality, just in 2 different ways, you see how easily they overlap. In the sense that flowers were often sacred to Aphrodite, Flora was the drive behind the flowers. So, one myth that I like to look at that I think connects Flora and Aphrodite comes from Ovid, where Flora herself takes credit for the creation of the rose, which is a flower deeply tied to Aphrodite. According to the story, Flora found the lifeless body of a nymph and, grieving her loss, transformed her into the first rose, infusing the flower with Aphrodite's beauty and its allure. For the beauty and allure of this nymph, even in death. This link solidifies the idea that Flora and Aphrodite share domains over floral magic, love, and also links them both to the underworld, which is an interesting and maybe left-hand turn from where we were going, but Aphrodite actually has many different chthonic or underworld connections. And there are theories that say Flora is just one face of Aphrodite, and I very much so love this theory because it makes total sense in my mind and my heart with my experience with her. When you look at how closely their energies are, with Aphrodite as Aphrodite simply having more domain and a more vast expression of her power, it just makes sense to me. And in some Roman rituals, offerings to Venus and Flora were actually made together, which could symbolize their shared power over fertility and abundance and things like that, but it also very much so deeply lends into this theory that Flora, or the Greek version of her, Chloris, was just another face of Aphrodite, and it adds to the depth of Aphrodite, her history, who she is, which is why I'm bringing you this podcast today, to simply go a little bit deeper into understanding who Aphrodite is and her power, but also give Flora her moment in the height of her power right now near Bealtaine, in the height of spring, really feeling into that kind of sensuality, that kind of fertility, and that kind of joy, because flowers are so joyous. Desire, sensuality, they don't have to be sexual in nature. They can be literally sensory. They can bring us into our body. They can tap us into the present moment. That is the other side of sensuality, literally being in your senses, in your body, and joyous about it. That's what flowers represent to me, which is why I wanted to bring you this face of Aphrodite, this festival of Flora today. The Floralia festival itself had an element of revelry and sexuality, like I mentioned before, with themes that were often connected to festivals that celebrated Aphrodite and Venus. So, how did they actually celebrate? What does that even mean? What does that look like? Well, in true Roman fashion, it was very extravagant. Here are a few of the key elements of the festival of Floralia. First off, we have flower crowns and petal showers. People adorned themselves in garlands of flowers, tossing petals into the streets, and all of this symbolizing the prosperity, beauty, joy, and abundance of the spring season. This was such a celebratory time. And we still see flowers used in our celebrations today. Think about weddings. Think about festivals. The flower crown in 2016, they were everywhere. It was all you would see. All over the world in different pagan festivals like May Day or Litha or any of the other, you name the festival, if it's in the warm part of the year like spring or summer, there are going to be flowers and bright colors involved. Undoubtedly, whatever the plant of the season is, it's there. But in our spring festivals, flowers are so abundant, they're so in your face and hard to miss. It makes sense that we would engage with them in this celebratory fashion, even as far back as ancient Rome, of course. The Romans loved their plants, they loved their gardens, and they loved to bring their plants into their celebrations in their homes, which is part of the reason why I know so much about them at this point in my life. But besides all of the flower crowns and flower petals and flower arrangements that lined the streets, there were also theatrical performances and comedic plays. This was a part of nearly every festival. It was called ritual theater, and it was very specific to the festival. So each festival, no matter what city you were in, across the board, for the most part, you could expect theatrical performances with specific themes that adhered to whatever that festival was about, right? So this festival was known for its risque and often bawdy performances, which were meant to celebrate life's playful and erotic side and pull you into that state, pull you into that celebratory experience. All classes of people joined in on these ritual theater performances because Floralia was a day when the rich and the poor met on a more equal playing ground. It was a very joyous, happy occasion, and the classes didn't matter so much on this day. Everyone mingled, mixed, and gave to one another during this particular festival. So we have flowers everywhere, we have ritual theater, comedy happening on every street corner. Everyone is in their best costumes, kind of like a pagan carnival. But as the spring sun fades and sunset comes upon your city, you would get incredibly excited as a Floralia festival goer, because the Floralia nights, the nights were where it was at. They were filled with dancing, drinking, and of course, feasting. This mirrored similar celebrations like Beeltena, but one of the more unique aspects of Floralia was the release of hares and goats, which were animals that were sacred to Flora. The hare was a fertility symbol all over, really, but especially in Rome, and it represented abundance and virility, while the goat was associated with untamed sensuality, which you might know if you've heard anything about the great god Pan. Now, animals were released, races were had to see if you could catch them. There were different beliefs about if you did catch them or if they passed you or whatever happened. There was different beliefs on what your night would end up being like. But of course, there were also sacrifices that ended up at the sacred feasts of the evening. So you would have these animal releases and then these animal ritual sacrifices, and you got to see it happen, and it all felt very, very religious, very sacred, very fun, and you knew that you were going to get to go and take part in this grand feast where lots of drinking and dancing and bonfire debauchery was going to be had, and no one was judging you whether you were a senator or a washerwoman. You were all mingling together, enjoying the spring festival. Those who were not participating in the debauchery outside of their homes were taking place in fertility rites, offering milk, honey, and floral garlands at Flora's temples and asking for things like prosperity, passion, and abundance in their lives. Especially if you were looking to have a child or get pregnant, or you were having fertility issues, this would be a great day to offer your ritualistic offering at Flora's temple and ask the goddess to aid you in your pregnancy or in getting pregnant. Today, as modern witches, we can look at that part of this festival as, what do we want to birth right now? Whether that's an actual child or a new idea, a new creative endeavor, you want to open a road for yourself, Floralia is an excellent time to do something like that. But there are other ways that we can honor Floralia in our practices as well. Creating an altar for Floralia and decorating it with fresh flowers, especially roses, or any other flowers of the season, poppies, daisies, native flowers, along with offerings of traditional milk and honey for Flora, could be a really powerful thing to do for this time. Like I mentioned earlier, this festival happened at the end of April towards the end of May. So you have about a month that you could leave this altar up and do whatever you wished at it, whether that is fertility magic, prosperity magic, passion magic, abundance magic, any of the associations we've talked about that you've latched onto in our conversation thus far could be done at this Floralia altar that could just amplify that magic that you're engaging in with this festival season. Floralia is a festival of unrestrained joy, so movement and dancing is also a wonderful way to honor not only yourself, but the energy of the season and indulge your senses in the unbridled joy and virility of spring. Just moving around with the intention of engaging with the spring energy could be a really fun and beautiful practice. Beyond that, of course, floral divination is another wonderful thing for this festival season for Floralia. Practicing floriography, which is the language of flowers, to receive spiritual messages or find out where you should go with your path, or to otherwise just intuitively gain divine insight, could be a really fun activity for this Floralia, for this season in the spring. I know from experience that most of the time, if you reach out to a flower, whether that is through a deck of cards or a meditation or literally going out and talking to a flower and opening yourself up to it, they often have quite a bit to say, and you might be surprised at what they share with you. So just keep that in mind, because we are about to be in Floralia. But if you do not want to go outside and have a little chat with your azalea bush, you could also have your own fire, whether that's with a candle or actually having a fire in your backyard and speaking affirmations or abundance into the flames, divining on the coals, or simply engaging with the energy of the Floralia bonfire and seeing where that takes you could be a really powerful, really wonderful thing to do during this time as well. Potion making during this time is one of my favorite things to do. I'm always drinking tea and stirring a little magic into it, asking the flowers in my tea to lend their joy, lend their magic, lend their messages and lessons into the potion that I'm making. But one of the potions I like to make during this time that have very acute, swift, and fun effects are making an aphrodisiac potion, either for just yourself or yourself and a partner, which would be kind of like a floral love tea. This potion uses hibiscus, rose, and honey, very simple, and it calls on Flora's essence to enhance attraction and pleasure. All you need to do is brew it like you would your regular tea, and as you stir in your honey, whisper sweet nothings, whisper your intentions, whisper good things, whisper affirmations, whisper what you want to happen in the pleasure and sensuality that you are about to partake in for your day or your engagement with yourself or partner, and see how that does for you. I know it's simple, but it is quite effective. Now, if none of that really strikes your fancy, there are so many other ways to engage with Flora's energy, the energy of spring, during Floralia. Honoring the animals in your area, honoring the sacred animals of the time, looking for messengers of Floralia, rabbits or birds, which also are animals of abundance, as well as just seeing what creatures you happen to notice during this time and spending some time investigating that and seeing what that might mean for you and the path that you're on right now. You never know how the wild is trying to reach out to you until you start looking and investigating with a joyous curiosity, which is a wonderful thing for the Floralia season to engage with. Joyous curiosity. Just another reason why I love this time of year and love this festival and really enjoy engaging with this deity and her energy. Flora and Floralia reminds us that life is not just about survival. It's about blooming, embracing joy, and reveling in the beauty of the natural world, and you as a part of the natural world. Whether you honor Flora through floral offerings, dance, or a simple appreciation for the world in bloom, this festival is a potent time for manifesting, celebrating pleasure, and embracing the magic of renewal that is just so abundant in springtime. So, witches, as the flowers unfurl and the world awakens, may you bloom in your own unique magic. Hail, Flora, and may your days be filled with beauty, joy, and of course, a little enchantment. Thank you so much for joining me today in this garden of history as we explored Flora and the ancient festival of Floralia. If you liked this episode, please do give us a follow, leave a review or comment, because I love getting reviews and comments. I love getting feedback from you, I truly do. Or share the show with one of your fellow witches. That helps the show so much, and it really brings traction to our show and gets us out there even more. I'm growing. I love to look at the statistics and see all of the different countries where you're listening from. Hello, Australia. That's the one that was the farthest away from me, and I was so surprised to see it. If you are listening from far outside of the United States, thank you so much for listening. I'm so happy to have you here. Truly, it means the world to me. This podcast is my baby, my little heart and soul happy place on the internet, and I'm just so happy to be here with you. So, if you want to link up with me on the internet outside of the podcast, all of those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much again, and until next time, don't forget to keep your roots deep and your dreams wild.